upon us, fine days are ahead of us. That can only mean one thing, a day in the bog, Maura, and here to tell us all about. We're delighted to have our folklorist friend Shane Lehan. Shane, tá fáilte rót.
Hey Shane.
I suppose when you look back, you say the day in the bog and the few days in the bog, the start of the summer really revolved around it, didn't it?
It did. You know, people couldn't cut turf too early because if the frost was there, sometimes the turf that they cut would freeze and it would turn into rust, into old dust. So they had to wait really until the weather was much better. And also, I suppose, from May onwards, you were bringing the cattle up to the mountaintops long ago and up to the summer pastures. So hand in hand, bringing people up, getting up to the lovely blanket huts up on top of the mountains.
Oh my goodness.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We'll come to all that stuff in a moment. Right? But they would go up to the top of the mountains, and I suppose cutting turf then was a necessity because Ireland, of course, we had very little woodland. The Elizabethans got rid of all our woodland, so we were left with turf as our main fuel. And there's huge traditions, huge customs about cutting turf and so on. And the first thing that people had to do is they had to get what they called the weapons.
Yeah.
And the weapons were the collection of items, and they brought them in here.
Weapons of mass destruction.
So you had the bog spade, which was important. You had the shlán. The shlán was all important. Shlán in Irish, funnily enough, is a spear, right?
Spear, yeah.
Wow.
So what you had was that you had, and this was specially made.
Show it up to the camera there, Shane. We have a quick look at it.
The wing on it here was important, okay? And they're all different varieties.
Is that what makes the turf shape?
Exactly.
You push this into the ground.
You push this into the ground. And you know, there were people getting ready with these all of the time. This was a treasured item. You had the blacksmith who made the shlán. Sometimes you had one that you bought in a hardware shop, but the blacksmith's shlán was absolutely important. And it might last you about 10 years before it wore out. I know of some of the men that I was doing some of my folklore recording from in the past. They would keep their shlans under the bed, and they would have them oiled down with sacking on them, and they would certainly keep them because there was a story of lightning is sometimes a big problem in the bog, especially if you're up on a mountaintop. And there was a story up where I was recording in Barracar in Chimay, Meanachoney, these areas in the Boggara Mountains, just about 20 miles north of Cork City, where they were cutting turf there. There were two men that they wouldn't leave their shlans after them, even when lightning was coming. And unfortunately, when they had their shlans in their hand and the lightning hit it and killed the men on the bog.
Conductor. Well, we have shots of some of these people that you actually talked to and recorded and all that.
So
Shane, who's this guy here?
Listen, Sean Main, this is a man called Christy Daly. He's not a man I interviewed, but he was talked about in a legendary way because you had to be a strong man on the Sean. Right? Just put it this way, because what would happen is that you have to push this down. You have to take up the big sod.
Sometimes remember the sod now is very heavy with water.
It's very heavy.
It's
I had a great phrase then from John Quirk, a man from Abbeyfield. He was telling me when the big sod came up and it was very heavy, he said, an in-calf heifer, he said. An in-calf heifer, if it was a heavy one coming up. But like that, you had to be very strong. And anyone who's cut turf, and I'm sure there are many people who remember cutting turf, will know that it's a slow process and it's a tiring process. This man, Christy Daly, he was from Gwynedd and he was able to cut something around a cubic metre of turf every 5 minutes. That was 1.5 sods a second.
Wow.
My God.
So he's just going through with that.
He was going like that, and he did that over, I think, a week-long period, 8 hours each day. And he had, it was in Lullymore Camp, it was one of the turf cutting competitions, and he was recorded. I think he has the world record for turf
Look at how straight that line is there when you look at the picture.
And you know, one of the really interesting things about that is that anyone who was cutting in the bog, and there might be other people cutting and have different banks.
That's the 40s, Shane, isn't it?
That was 44. But they would keep the bank as straight as possible. Now the fellas would put out a line.
They did,
And when guys were going home, and one of the important items you had for opening up the bog was this fella here. This is the hay knife. Now this was normally kept in the haggard for cutting off bits of hay and so on, that. But one of the things here is that this was to cut off what we call the scraw, the top of the bog. And what happened is, people think that the bog, when people were cutting turf, they kill the bog. They don't. You cut off the scraw, cut off the little sods. You use the spade to prise them off, and you put that into what we call the hole. The hole was down lower, okay, and then your bank of turf was open, and you started to cut that, and you had, if it was a blanket bog, you had first sod, second sod, third sod, and the top sod was...
How long do you go, or how far do you go down when you're cutting turf?
If you were in some of the raised bogs in the Midlands, you could be going down 20 or 30 sods. I mean, they're huge. Whereas
it's only when you get into it you realise how deep they can,
oh
they
my
can
goodness. But it's incredible. You found all sorts of things then in the bog, which is kind of interesting.
Go on, tell us.
Especially in the second sod, usually is where you came across it. One was you found maybe a piece of timber, a piece of bog deal.
And that bog oak, is that
bog oak, yeah. And what they used to do with that is they used to dry it, split it, and that became what we call splinters. And that was used for lighting. They used to light that, and if you long ago, before there was ever paraffin oil or electricity, you'd have this long...
No, it was like a light.
Like a light. You'd light the tip of the splinter, and what would happen is that would give a bursting flame. It would maybe only last maybe 10 minutes. And if someone was writing a letter long ago at night time, this is what they would have to use, the splinter.
And it was and really illuminating.
And the second thing that you'd find is bog butter. Now,
I've heard of this.
But so people used to used to go up to the summer pastures. They used to be making the butter up above.
Now you were talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
I'm talking going back. Caroline Eastwood, one of my colleagues, an archaeological colleague, she radiocarbon dated the bog butter in Ireland. We have bog butter everywhere, but loads of them in the museums. And what happened is she looked at all the vessels. They go back to the Iron Age. They go right back through time. So you're going back 2,500 years of that tradition.
Butter?
So it's literally butter. So in the absence of a fridge, what you had is the bog is anaerobic. There's no oxygen there. It's a constant environment.
So it's a preservative.
It's cool. And what you did is, you want to keep your butter, you put it into your firkin, into your vessel,
into your fridge.
Put it into your fridge, and left it there. And when you needed it, you could take it out.
So hang on, did they just forget to take it out? Is that why you keep finding the bog butter? I forget where I left my bog butter too, I guess.
Essentially, as some of them go back maybe 2,500 years ago, obviously a number of people have forgotten them over time. But it was a very interesting sort of find. And again, the people that I've interviewed in my career, they've all found and come across bog butter. It's a common thing to find.
What's it wrapped in then, Shane?
It's usually in a wooden vessel, like very often in a churn, or sometimes in mathers they call them, like the Liam McCarthy cup, that sort of shape that is there. And you find we have beautiful examples in and the churns are interesting because they're actually what we call tumble churns, that you actually swing them from the roof, and to churn it, instead of using a dash, you push it side by side that way.
But was there some kind of thought then as well that they were giving something back to nature by putting the butter into the ground?
Well, there's that sort of idea that it was a sort of an offering to the goddess and all that sort of thing.
What do you think? Do you think they just forgot it?
Well, I tell you what, do you know what I'm thinking about the bog these days? You know, I'm thinking that we're under the restrictions, and hopefully as the days go by, they'll be eased off, and everyone will be thinking of going to the beach. But I tell you, when you're up in the bog, it's something absolutely beautiful, and I love the environment of the bog. I love the bog cotton. I love the various grasses that are there, the firs, the heathers, the ling heather that's up there.
You're right, Shane.
You know, it's absolutely beautiful. And you know, you've got the curlew, the snipe. There are hares in the bog. One of the ones I love is I come across quite a lot are goats.
Goats?
Yeah.
Are these wild goats?
They're wild goats. This is a photograph. Well, one day I was up in the bog and this fella came along, and that was grand. My friend George Rummy, he was schlawning, he was using the schlawn. I was drawing out and I was spreading the turf out and beyond. And this guy came along, and every time I put down the turf, anyway, putting out in ranges as we call it, what did your man do? But he came along and he piddled, urinated all over the turf. And we were looking at this, and I'd go back again, and I'd get another barrow of turf, and I'd bring it out. He'd follow me on, next load, the same again. Well, we forgot about all that. That was kind of what happened.
Did he pee all over the whole lot of it?
He piddled every single time we brought it out.
He was smart with territory and stuff, obviously.
He was, but the next thing that happened anyway is that ages later, during the winter, I had a big turf fire lighting at home. That was great. I had people coming for a bite to eat, and whoever came in the door anyway, they were kind of cold, and they were going up, and they were saying, "I know what we're having tonight." And I said, "What are we having?" They said, "We're going to have some baked goat's cheese." And I said, "Baked goat's cheese?" I said, "How do you feel?" And what it was the smell of the goat's business in the turf going up,
and they got the smell of it.
So it was great. But you come across everything in the bog, from frogs, from hares, and you know.
I saw a few deer in the bog last week. I was up around the bog last week. Yeah.
But what I love about it too is that it's a kind of a place of solitude. There's a silence in the bog. There's a place to go. You know, I think if people are looking for a picnic, and they want to pick somewhere different. We have gorgeous.
There's only one
farmlands.
downside. The midges.
Oh, the midges. Midges are, you have to put spray on.
They're-
You know that lemongrass and stuff is pretty good for them.
Yeah.
Keep them away.
Oh my God.
There are two things that won't come out, that people will come out of the bog for. One is lightning.
Yeah.
Lightning is a danger. The other are what they call the small flies, the midges.
And come here, why is lightning so dense? Because there's so much water inside the bog, isn't there?
You're up so high. You're
Okay.
up so high up at the mountain tops, you know, and people really were afraid of that. And in fact, in the bog, you can see the weather coming in. You can actually see a cloud. You can say, we've got another hour here
Because you're
before
up
we
so
have to
high.
get out.
Shane, can I ask you, there are bogs around the country you can visit now, aren't there? I'm sure people can go online and check them out.
There are bogs everywhere. I mean, Ireland literally is a bog. If you think about it, the centre
There's
of
one
Ireland.
called Morbura, I think.
The Bura is a beautiful
Yeah.
bog, absolutely great, and it's one of the places to visit and so on. And I suppose what I'd like to do is there's so much controversy about the bogs and cutting turf and so on. If we put that aside for a moment and just say to ourselves, our environment is beautiful. Why don't we go out and celebrate it? Why don't we visit it? We don't have to go cutting turf.
No, you
Some
don't.
people are still cutting turf.
Yeah.
and
But
there's-
some people are
there's a-
allowed and others aren't. That's the way it is with bogs.
That's all what I want to talk about is there's a beautiful environment out there, an ecosystem that is different, and it should
Embrace
be.
it.
It's on
We
our,
should
it's
embrace
on our
it.
doorstep as
It's
well.
absolutely beautiful. It's terrific.
Shane, as always,
Shane,
we
go
never
ahead.
have enough time.
Great
We
to
talked
have
to
you.
you for
My
literally hours for the whole show, I think.
We only got through half your weapons.
Half your weapons, the rest of
There's
the
a lot of stuff there. Yeah, we'll keep
I love
that for
the
the winter.
smell of it.
Yeah, it's
You can't
gorgeous,
beat
yeah.
the smell of the turf fire. I don't think I'd like it now with the goat pea. I think I'd just have the regular turf fire.
Certainly not. We take some goat's cheese
Sure,
away.
yeah.
Anyway, a man who's well used to eating goat's cheese at all the banquets he attends is Mr. Martin Morrissey, and he has some